Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this event at the Royal United Services Institute. I'm Jack Watling. I'm the Research Fellow for Land Warfare. And today we are discussing the industrial side of the war in Ukraine. Now, as many of you have no doubt been following the conflict, I shouldn't need to elaborate on the importance of industrial capacity in Ukraine's ability to resist Russia's invasion. And therefore, it is with great pleasure today that we are joined by representatives of Ukroboronpr, the state defense industrial organization, which is responsible for cohering, organizing, and running Ukraine's defense industries. I just want to flag a few points. When this event was organized, it was going to be with Mr. Yuri Husev, who is the head of Ukroboronpr. Unfortunately, events in Kiev of a few minutes ago meant that we've had to shuffle things around slightly. So we are instead joined by Sergei Markovsky and Valery Ivashenko, who is the deputy head of Ukroboronpr. Sergei is going to make a prepared set of remarks at the beginning of the event, and we will then move into a discussion and a Q&A. Given the ongoing conflict, there are certain sensitivities around what can be said. All comments are going to be on the record, but you will forgive me if there are some questions that we're not able to delve into over the course of the event. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Sergei Markovsky, who is going to give some prepared remarks, and then we can move into questions and answers. I would invite you to pose your questions through the Q&A feature, which you can access through your browser or through Zoom, and I will select those questions and put them to our guests once the presentation is over. You can ask the questions at any time, and so if you preload them in, then we'll be good to go when we get to the Q&A. And with that, I am delighted to hand over to Sergei and Valery Ivashenko.
Jack, thank you for introduction and for invitation for this event. We are grateful to Russia and in general to UK and other allies for their help and also for, let's say, informational and research support of our efforts. And I'm also happy to read out the introductory remark, which was initially meant to be present by our CEO, Yuri Gusev. So, Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine, which was ongoing since February 24, has brought the world back to realizations and long-term intense military conflicts between major countries, unfortunately acknowledged in the past, and forced a critical look at the readiness of the West and Ukraine to participate in such conflicts. Particular attention should be focused on the ability of rapid industrial mobilization, which is necessary to support Ukraine and achieve, if not strategic superiority, then at least parity with the military potential of Russian Federation. To put straightly, now it comes to the war of industries. The first 6 months of the war in Ukraine demonstrated that NATO countries and their partners currently do not have sufficient stockpiles of weapons and military equipment. On the end, their production capacities are quite restrained to provide the level of outputs necessary for waging the full-scale and, what most important, long-term protracted war. Such situation causes serious concern because impossibility to provide even the most modern systems with the appropriate amount of ammunition completely nullifies their technological advantages. And this is also amplified by complete disregard of Russian leadership to human life. They are ready to sacrifice millions and millions of their own citizens just to achieve a small and vague advances. Another obstacle to solving this problem is a loss of control over the supply chains of strategic material and components. And we also started to see this during COVID crisis, but unfortunately it was discussion around healthcare and automotives and mobile phones, but not about such crucial things as national security. And yeah, after the end of the Cold War, the demand for weapons in NATO fell sharply. And that's maybe also the one of explanation of such situation, which led to the disappearance of the industrial base capable of providing all these components and maintaining this supply chain. For example, in the United States, it has traditionally acted as the arsenal of the free world, and so far now is also the main industrial leader of defense sector in NATO. According to General Joseph Dunford, ex-head of Joint Chief Staff of the US Armed Forces, the defense and production capabilities are not ready for long-term intensive conflict with an equal enemy. And we know that Russia so far can be considered quite an equal enemy in terms of readiness to fight. The main challenges for the West industry appear to be shortage of qualified workers and engineers, dependence on China for rare earth materials, insufficient volumes of production of explosive and special chemistry, and also a lot of regulatory burden. We in Ukraine, as beneficiaries of a lot of material assistance, started to fill these shortages and shortcomings on our own because we need to maintain and to repair our equipment. On top of this, we also need to maintain and repair Soviet-style equipment. So you can understand that we have double challenge, which is multiplied. And winning a protracted war between equal adversaries requires absolute industrial superiority, because we care about our people. Even more, the enemy's realization that the opponent does not have the means to quickly build up and maintain our own capabilities, and also does not pay due attention to development of such a means, is an open invitation to aggression. I think this is the point that should be taken into account looking at other countries in the region and other territories which are important to Western allies. Ukraine's contribution to the formation of NATO industrial base, which will be able to respond to such challenges, should not be underestimated, because we really believe that Western countries can efficiently mobilize themselves. To say until 1991, Ukraine was one of the main centers of the Soviet defense industry, developed and producing the lion's share of all weapons, including the most strategic ones, for example, intercontinental ballistic missiles. So far, we also believe that we can help Western countries with this. And despite colossal lack of funding and constant obstruction on the part of Russian Federation, Ukraine managed not only to preserve much of Soviet heritage, but also to achieve success in its all developments. The flagship of the Black Sea fleet of the Russian Federation, the cruiser Moskva, which was sunk by Ukrainian anti-ship missiles Neptune in April 2022, is a vivid proof of this. Actually, there were two ships like this built in Mykolaiv, one of our companies, by our companies, and both of them were destroyed by our weapons. Despite numerous Russian attacks on Ukrainian defense enterprises, Ukrainian defense industry remains capable of fulfilling its tasks. Ukroboronpr employs more than 6,000 scientists, engineers, and qualified workers, specializing in the development, manufacture, and maintenance of weapons, military special equipment, ammunition, and special chemicals. Having a large number of citizens with high and special technical education, Ukraine is also able to quickly increase the number of employees of the defense sector. And now defense sector, due to existing demand, is also a prime employer of a newcomer specialist. The Russian Federation is aware of the importance of the Ukrainian defense industry, as a number of its own systems are still critically dependent on the Ukrainian products. We also believe that starting the war was one of the response to these strategic challenges. Ukrainian mineral and raw materials base, which includes large reserves of ferrous and non-ferrous and rare earth metals, is also a crucial element in this puzzle. Just to say that one of the key targets of Russia and Crimea was its oil and gas deposits. Ukraine, which already today performs the function of the defender of Western civilization, the shield of Europe, maybe it's pretentious, but we still believe that our soldiers gave their lives every day for this idea of Ukraine joining the European Union, can also offer many other important elements that are critically important for the collective security of NATO countries. In addition to direct participation in joint ventures and other form of cooperation with NATO industry, you can also act as an important tool for replacing Russian and Chinese influence in the countries of Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It is no secret the supply of weapons and military equipment of these countries, the training of military personnel and military technical specialists create significant political leverage for these supplies. But to avoid any doubt, our current focus is winning the war. And we are working 24/7 for this purpose. Ukraine, with its unique expertise in post-Soviet armaments, provided political and financial support from the democratic world, is a natural leader in these markets, and also providing our experience of dealing with battlefield challenges, real-life battlefield challenges of the large-scale war. Awareness of these opportunities and the correct use of the huge potential of Ukraine depends without exaggeration on your support, and we believe that together we can make new, safer world. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Sergei, for the opening remarks. I think just as a starting point for some of our listeners, it might be useful if you just explained a little bit about how Ukroboronpr works, because it's very different to a Western defense company. And so understanding the context of Ukrainian defense industry might be very useful. What is Ukroboronpr as an organization? Some of our listeners will understand, some may not be as familiar.
Good afternoon again, Jack. I would like to tell a few issues connected with the activity of state concern Ukroboronpr. First, we work together with our enterprise that are included in concern in very hard conditions, beginning from February last year, because our enterprises was under strikes of rocket and bombs attacks during first weeks, first month of full-scale Russian invasion. Unfortunately, we lost a few of enterprise. For example, enterprise that was located in Kharkov region. For example, Balakleya repair plant was destroyed Russians. This conditions in which we continued our activity. At the same time, we start to help our enterprises to relocate it and to create additional ability on the more safety regions of Ukraine. And third, at the same time, we continued the transformation of state concern Ukroboronpr and its enterprises from state status to joint stock company. We are continuing to provide our activity in very hard conditions, in conditions of war. But we see and our future perspectives to create new manufacturing, new types of our responsibilities, not only traditional ones, like, for example, repair of armored vehicles, aircrafts, shipbuilding industry. We must to create sub-industry of developing and producing air defense and missile defense systems. And this task, this challenge is most difficult, most strong, and most important for us. This task we can solve only together with our Western partners, and we hope that states, NATO members, including Great Britain, USA, could help us to create such sub-industry, and we could manufacture such systems as well as together with our partners and ourselves, using our own abilities. But it's a future perspective. Next, that we know, we must provide our activity in which way. This continue to repair and modernization all types of weapon and armament which was produced and created in Soviet time and using now in Ukrainian armed forces and third countries. We must to push Russia from this market, weapon market, and begin to produce components and examples of armament instead of Russian in Asia, Africa, and South American region. This topic was discussed on our first part of our meeting, and I understand. I hope that we understand it one another, and we will provide cooperation, close cooperation in near future and for long perspective. Thank you.
A number of our audience, I think, are from defense industry and are interested in how they can help. A question from Alex Wolchester is, how would you prioritize or summarize the types of support that Ukrainian defense industry needs, specifically as compared to the Ukrainian military? Is there support that your international partners can provide that would be most beneficial or consequential in you meeting the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces?
Let me say, as I said, we are fully focused now on the victory. So, frankly, our priorities now are the same as armed forces. So, and basically here we are running into this, introductory remarks that we cannot talk openly. But I mean, the answer is there in press everywhere. So we sidelined with our Minister of Defense and General Zaluzhny. We announced the priorities.
And anyway, I could a little part of answer. We need air defense and missile defense system. Unfortunately, Russian enemy destroys our cities, kill a lot of civilian people, women, children, old men, and we need to get right now effective missile defense system, first of all, and air defense system. But missile defense is priority number one for our armed forces. Second priority, as I know from militaries, it's artillery, long-range artillery, and we thanks not only Great Britain, whole European society for delivering artillery system 155 calibers from France, Poland, Italy, from
UK,
US. It's helped us to stand up on the battlefield on the western south of Ukraine. But regarding the defense industry, we can talk about our future perspectives, because now we must do anything that help our armed forces. But we understand that after victory, we will have a challenge for our defense industry that is to provide support and supply our forces with using new types, new systems of weapon and armament, and therefore we need to get ability to learn documentation, to try to train our specialists on the companies which developed and produced such types of armament and weapon.
I think a follow-up question to that, which gets to one of the things you're talking about, is from Rob Ryder, who's a strategic advisor at Rheinmetall, and he essentially asks, how can we as industry and governments, as Ukraine's partners, assist in the maintenance or upgrade of vehicles in Ukraine, that, whether that be from assisting in your capacity in Ukraine, or whether that be in what we prioritize outside of Ukraine, but potentially not just us producing, but working with Ukroboronpr, because you highlighted that for a long time, you're going to be reliant on vehicles that are already in use by the Ukrainian armed forces, that we don't necessarily have expertise in how to provide spare parts or support. So how do you see the future of a relationship between Ukrainian defense industry and Western defense industry as you manage that transition that you just described between your current platforms, for which you have an urgent need, and future platforms, which are, you know, the weapons of the future for the Ukrainian armed forces, which are probably closer to Western systems?
Let's say, coming back to priorities of our armed forces, it's not a secret that they want to be maintenance done the closest possible to the battle line. For them, it's frankly unacceptable that valuable and excellent material and equipment travel thousands of miles for the maintenance, because it's like waste of time, and they, let's say, don't feel comfortable and secure because they have no visibility of lead times. You know, they need to plan some actions. So the wish of armored forces, as I heard, is to have everything as close as possible. Then, for sure, there are some legitimate constraints like security, insurance, or whatever, IPR questions, etc. So we are open to work with all the partners for the mutual benefit or mutual comfort in this case to meet the needs of our armed forces as much as possible. And then this can be a good base for the closer common activities on new equipment and other opportunities.
Talking about where we are going to provide our activity in Ukraine or abroad to Ukraine, we consider both variants. We are creating additional capability, technological capability on the more safety regions of Ukraine concerning our enterprises that are located on the south or east of Ukraine. We created reserve and additional technological ability on the western region of Ukraine, and we are creating together with our partners manufacturing abroad Ukraine on the territory of our neighbors. Both variants дополняют друг друга. Complement one another and will allow us to reach necessary results.
Tim Martin has asked a question that I think follows on from something you just highlighted, which is, could you speak to some of the successes or adaptations that Ukroboronpr made in transitioning to a industry at war? You mentioned that a number of your facilities were overrun or struck in the opening days, but have you been able to increase production? Have you been able to reorganize aspects of your work to rapidly expand your capacity to meet the needs of the armed forces? I don't know whether you could give us any examples of how this can be done, because if we were to end up in a conflict, we would similarly need to rapidly accelerate our production. It would be very interesting to hear what lessons you might have learned in going through that process. I appreciate you might not want to talk about specifics and certainly not locations, But in terms of the process, I think people would be very, very interested.
There is not any wondering. It's only hard work of our employers, our workers, our services, and our managers. All our enterprises began to work during 24 hours, 7 days of week. All manufacturing of our enterprises works in 3 or 2 shifts per 8 hours, 3 shifts, or 2 shifts per 20 hours. Whole day, from 8 or 7 o'clock morning to 7 or 8 o'clock next morning.
Yeah, so as for practical questions, how we transform it, I mean, it was already in use that we started production of mortar shells. You can find it easily. We have already started production of drones. It's also on the news, and you can find it easily. It's also on the news about that we repair not only our, but captured Russian equipment. So all this information, I mean, it's publicly available and it is confirmed. So you can imagine this all is impossible without adapting the processes. And actually, it's, as Mr. Ivashenko says, it's no wonder. It's just 24/7 for everybody, for workers, and also for administrative personnel and for everybody. So just work and just constant sense of urgency, because we understand that often our relatives are there dying on the front lines, and we are in the safe places. We should need just all possible to make them safer and to have them back home.
Certainly prior to the conflict, there was a lot of reporting about concerns of corruption in Ukrainian defense industry. And I think, Mr. Ivashenko, you highlighted some of the changes that are being made in governance of Ukroboronpr. Could you speak to the processes by which you are trying to make sure that those historical issues of corruption and loss of equipment in supply chains and so forth are overcome? I note that there were a number of arrests made last week, for example, showing that the Ukrainian government is conscious that this is an ongoing issue that has to be managed. Could you speak to that challenge?
I think that there is more talking about corruption in our defense industry than really corruption. I worked in this sphere for a long time, from maybe 1999, with different breaks in my career. But there was certain cases in this long history, but it's not system problem for our defense industry, especially today when we have the most terrible hard war in our history. Therefore, I don't know any our colleagues from our enterprise that included they are included in our state concern, which I could accused of corruption.
Yeah, I will take further for sure. I mean, Mr. Ivashenko used to live in Denmark a lot. Oh, it's like important.
7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. So he is, well supportive of Western values. This.
And as you know, as your colleagues know, Denmark is the state, country, society #1 to protect corruption,
to fight against corruption,
and fighting corruption in the whole world. Therefore, as I lived and worked in Denmark during 7 years, I know about how to fight corruption, how to protect corruption more than
protect against corruption.
Against corruption more than majority of my compatriots. It's very simple. It's not to. It's we don't to develop a bicycle. Our national Ukrainian bicycle. We must to take examples of successful peoples, successful countries, and provide this experience inside Ukraine.
Yeah, practically, I will follow up on this because I think the question is, and it's very practical. Oh, it's both sides, values and practical implementation. So. Actually, we are building quite modern team or people who, as Valery, used to work and lived abroad quite a long time to have Western values. But practically, we are introducing all the corporate governance, OECD compliant, with supervisory board, audit committees, independent audit committees. There are also representatives of the, let's say, former US officials in our board. We are now going through transformation, so it means that we are turning from the state-owned and directly managed by state property fund companies to the LCs or shareholding companies subject to audit and regulatory and supervisory by prosecutors and all this. And basically you can see the results. So it's all the news of people caught. It's like with cooperation with top management. So it's to some extent initiated by us, and we support this, and our top management is supportive to this, and we are grateful to our law enforcers that they are helping us to find out some black ships, let's say. Our next steps is to have the full IT and transformation, to have everything accounted. We already have quite a good IT, but it's not fully integrated. So our next step is to have everything done according to standards with ERP, PLM, and all this stuff, which will allow us the instant accountability on everything which is delivered. But again, we are now through process of annual audit. So despite the war, we are going to issue audited accounts. We don't stop with this despite the war. So, compliance is #1 priority. Okay, #2, maybe, to be frank, because first priority is to win the war.
Thank you very much. There's another question here, which I think you highlighted the impact on your maritime flank. Some of the most high-profile creations coming out of Ukraine defense industry have been maritime capabilities, whether they are uncrewed vessels or Neptune, with its favorable interaction with the Moskva. But how do you see the future of your maritime industries? Because obviously you're under blockade. Mykolaiv has received very heavy damage. Do you see this as an area of priority for collaboration, or is this an area that has become particularly challenging?
I'm sure that this this kind of cooperation is the most priority for us, because now our shipyard industry almost equal zero, because our Nikolaev enterprises cannot work function in the same level like in past time. This first. Second, we unfortunately have old technologies that don't allow us to develop and create modern, effective warships for our Navy. Only one enterprise, one design bureau, I know it's a very high level scientific and technology level. This Nikolaev Design Project Center of shipyard. Maybe you know. Our abbreviation.
Yeah, it's some abbreviations like Ukroboronpr, which are difficult to pronounce. But
I know managers from this design bureau, and they are very modern, as well as like scientists, as well as like managers. But this the only enterprise in this sub-industry. All next, including Zaremash project, in past very powerful, very modern enterprise of gas turbine engines. Now part of its technical capabilities was destroyed by Russians. Part of them was dislocated from Nikolaev, and to continue manufacturing activity for this enterprise in modern conditions, it's very difficult. So after victory, we must to begin building to build new our shipyards in the industry. Maybe using Zaremash project, another shipyards in Mykolaiv enterprises, but I think we must to create new Ukrainian shipyard industry with the help of our partners and friends.
Yeah, so it's very valid point, because now it's all these facilities are on Navy blockage. So strictly saying, if we say Navy, we cannot build navies there. It's just, physically, because it's immediately bombed by Russians. Then, as Valery said, companies were dislocated. So it means that we preserved potential to restart. So we have people, we have competencies, even some equipment dislocated. So we can work especially on related areas. So basically, the famous example when internet was an initial military invention but used it for civil purposes, it's like the same. So we can use our competences and our technologies in other applications, which is to some extent already done, but yeah. So it's not lost, but it's on pause, let's say, and we welcome any partnership on this, like joint ventures, joint activities, investments, or whatever, because it's to be rebuilt when we win.
I think the point about joint ventures, but also about the conversion of civilian into military purpose and vice versa, feeds on very well to a question from Andrew Graham. He highlights that the Ukrainian armed forces are using a lot of capabilities made by companies that were not previously in the defense space. There's a lot of innovation going on in Ukraine at the moment. There are many companies that have repurposed themselves to support the armed forces. And obviously, those are not traditionally part of Ukrainian defense industry. Could you comment on how well you have been able to work with those new, smaller entities, whether you've been able to support them in scaling up what they have invented and what's proven useful, or whether this has been a challenge because you suddenly have competition in Ukraine for the components, for example, for a lot of these systems between enterprises that used to be centrally coordinated. How have you been able to gear with or interact with those new actors who are trying to support the war effort?
Let's say it's a very good question, because it's pointed out that we are not only the one player, and we acknowledge that the defense industry should grow, and we will grow together with all this ecosystem and not, at expense of the system. Then I will go directly to the challenges, and somehow that as in any defense industry, components and whatever should be accepted by end user armored forces. So here I would not say anything new. So we are happy to work with any supplier, and we are working with any supplier if it's accepted by armored forces, our customer, because we are more like an integrator. So we are not really competing with components producers. We welcome all the components producers to join forces if it expands our capacity to deliver to armored forces. So that's it. We don't have direct competition.
Another question, which I think touches on a point that Mr. Ivashenko made. Is Ukraine looking to phase out its Soviet equipment and transfer completely onto NATO standardized equipment? Or do you anticipate needing to support Soviet legacy equipment for a long time in the Ukrainian armed forces?
I think we will continue to use Soviet types of armament and weapons certain period. For example, 5, 10, maybe 15 years, not more. For example, Soviet types of aircraft, Sukhoi and Mikoyan, we could maximum use with the reparation and modernization only during 2035. This red line. After that, we physically cannot to use this technique. Therefore, we have such of red lines for another types of Soviet armament and weapon. And from another side, we have already got a lot of new modern Western weapon and armament from our Western partners. Artillery system, armored technique, maybe we will get new aircrafts, helicopters. So we must to orient ourselves for support and supply using this new technique and begin to produce element spare parts units and in next step full scale license production. So we must to solve two tasks in parallel. Continue repair and support using all types of armament and weapons in Ukrainian armed forces, and started to do the same with the new Western armament system that Ukrainian armed forces have got from our partners.
Yeah, to basically, yeah, so it's like gradual shift to the NATO standard, and we are conscious that Soviet systems have their lifetime limitations, plainly saying physically. After a certain number of hours, aircrafts will just, fall apart. But then, until this is, it's possible, we also invite Western companies to participate in modernization of this equipment using some technologies, because we may have this, like, for example, aircraft, like the big thing still capable to fly, but for sure Russian, like design it or equipment should be replaced, and Soviet systems should be replaced with something modern. So that's the task where we invite all the Western defense companies to join efforts, and not only pure defense, but also suppliers of raw materials, components, etc.
Very good. Well, I think we've covered most of the questions from the audience, and we're cantering towards the close of the session. So I would just like to thank you both for giving us your time today. I appreciate that you have a limited amount of time in London, and there are a lot of important meetings that you need to take part in. But I hope that this has been a useful insight to those online into the challenges that Ukrainian defense industry are facing, the direction of travel for Ukrainian defense industry and their aspirations in the future, and also some of the hurdles that have been overcome in terms of adjusting under very difficult conditions. The one thing that strikes me whenever I have engaged with not just Ukroboronpr, but also some of your concerns and some of the newer entities that are working in Ukrainian defense, is that here it takes us a very long time in peacetime with regulations, with process to do anything. And you are having to deliver very, very quickly on new capabilities like Neptune or others, and bring them into service. The challenge, I think, for us is that if we are to interact and cooperate in some of the ways that you described to make sure that the equipment we're providing can be sustained in Ukraine, to make sure that you have the raw materials you need, the components you need to maintain production, then our industry needs to be put more onto a war footing so that it can actually deliver at the speed of relevance within the time frame that is necessary to make sure that you can meet the needs and the consumption rates of the Ukrainian armed forces. So that gap between your international partners and yourselves is something that we have to work hard to overcome. But thank you very much. And I think I can speak on behalf of the audience to say that that was a very interesting discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for organizing. First of all, thank you to the audience for joining, because we understand that their time is also valuable. One remark, I think our task even more difficult, our together, not only Ukrainian, because we are also building today for the future. And our task is more difficult because we want both to make it urgently, but also want to make it in a proper way, so we can keep cooperating with respecting all the laws and all the procedures, but not, not to make in a long talks, but to build for the future. So we need to both to be compliant and to deliver for tomorrow and for yesterday, let's say.
Thank you, Jake, for a very interesting and useful discussion during today, and we hope we continue our cooperation with many successes in near future.
Starting from yesterday.
Starting from yesterday.